What's the difference between a sichah that was mugeh and a sichah that was not mugeh? Aren't they all the words of the Rebbe?
On a certain level, this is a technical question. I'm going to start with Bilti Mugeh, unedited sichas. The Rebbe has an introduction to the Sefer Teres Shalom, which is a sichas from the Rebbe Rashab, from the previous Rebbe's father, that the Rebbe published in 1947 and 1948. And we know that the Rebbe was very into it. His neshama was in the Teres Shalom. He was very preoccupied with the preparing the Teres Shalom for print and so on. In fact, the Teres Shalom originally came out kopir. It was not printed. It was typed by the Rebbe himself. He typed up the Teres Shalom, and then a year later it was typed up. It was what's the word? It was printed. It was laid out for print, and it was published in Tafshin Ches. So when the Rebbe gave out the Teres Shalom, he wrote an introduction. Many of the sichas in the Sefer Teres Shalom are from the Rebbe Yatz. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote them himself. But many of them are from Chassidim. And he raised the question, how can you rely on a chassid? And he said, when you take into consideration that the Chassidim were very dedicated to their Rebbe, and every single word that came from the mouth of their Rebbe was valuable to them, and they're prepared to be mesa nefesh for it, you can assume that they went to every length possible, that they would ascertain, that they would come to the emes of what the Rebbe said to the maximum ability that they have. In other words, when a chassid, a serious chassid, transcribes a maimer or a sichah of his Rebbe, because he's a chassid and he cares so much about his Rebbe and what his Rebbe's Torah, that's the greatest seal, that's the greatest confirmation that what they wrote is precise. So there's a certain assumed achrayus, responsibility and trustworthiness, ne'emonis, in the hanochas and the Torah of Chassidim because of their greatest kashas to their Rabbi. Nevertheless, an unedited sichah is an unedited sichah, and there's a number of aspects to that. The simple aspect is that not everybody can understand everything a Rebbe says, and the Rebbe meant, and the Rebbe hinted, and so on. And ve'ed ve'gam ze'ike, there's another factor. Another factor is that frequently the Rabbeim said one thing and then wrote the same thing differently. In other words, there's what they said and what they meant. And frequently when the Rabbeim would then write the sichah that they spoke, they would write it in a significantly different way because that's how it had to be preserved in print. So b'shas ma'aseh, when they said it in one way. And when they gave it out, they revealed what they were really trying to preserve for posterity. You see this especially in the Maimorim of the Rebbe Marash, where we have both his Maimorim as he wrote them, as well as his Maimorim as he said them and transcribed by his son, the Rebbe Rashab, und die Gesogte sehr weit von der Geschriebene, that's the expression. What he said is very different than what he wrote. So when the Rebbe speaks, even if you're writing everything he said, there's a huge difference between what he spoke and how he wanted to be preserved in Ksav, as we see by some of the Rabbeim, an enormous difference between what they said and what they wrote. And another very powerful example of this is the previous Rebbe Sichas, where the previous Rebbe, especially during the years that speech was difficult for him, would speak very bekitzer. And when he would write, sometimes or often he would write his own Sichas, it was something a whole different Sichah. I've heard that the Rebbe would be given a transcript, the Frierdiker Rebbe, of what he wrote, and they would just make a line across it, X it out, turn over the page, and rewrite the whole thing. And in rewriting it, it went from a page to 10 pages or 20 pages, and he developed a whole union. And sometimes it wasn't only a more elaborate version of what he said, it was something quite different. So in unedited sichah, you only know what he said, you don't know what he meant, as opposed to when the sichah is edited. Now, as far as Hagah is concerned, editing is concerned, I want to attach this to something else. The Rebbe is the consummate chassid, as we know. And the Rebbe gave infinite importance to something that a Rebbe does, even if he does it with a remez, or a nod of his head, or a stroke of his pen. For example, the last 5 years of the physical life of the Frierdiker Rebbe, B'chaim Yossi Almadein, there were no more Maimorim. In fact, there's a story that the Rebbe Shmuel Zalmanov went into the Rebbe Rayatz, And he proposed that Chassidim should be brought from Europe to meet the Rebbe, and he said, what's the point? Ich sag doch nicht keine Maimorim. I'm not saying Maimorim. So our Rebbe took old Maimorim of the previous Rebbe from Russia and from Western Europe, from Latvia, that the Chassidim didn't have, and he copied them word for word, added notes, brought them into the previous Rebbe, who would add prefixes and suffixes, and sometimes dividing one Maimon into two Maimorim, and published them as the Maimorim from the years Tavshin Vav, Tavshin Zayin, Tavshin Ches, Tavshin Tes, and Tavshin Yud, 1946, 47, 48, 49, and 50. It's the same Maimorim. The Rebbe didn't write new ones. They were the same old Maimorim from many, many years earlier that was simply reprinted or redistributed, and they became the Maimorim of these years, even though they were old. And of course, one of the examples of this is the Maimeh Basi Lagani, which was given out officially for the yahrzeit of the previous Rebbe's grandmother. And then when the previous Rebbe passed away, it became what the Rebbe called the Maimeh of Hilul. So here you have a Maimeh. The Frierdiker Rebbe did not write it for that occasion. And arguably, the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't even choose it. I mean, the Rebbe chose it, which is the same thing as the previous Rebbe choosing it. And when the previous Rebbe passed away, that itself was proof that the Rebbe always intended that it should be for his histalkas, for his hilula. Because by a Rebbe, every tnuah is very precise. And it's precise at K'tzei Ha'achra. So whether a Rebbe actually sits down and writes a Maim for a particular occasion, or simply says or agrees, give out this one, that has all the credibility as if he sat down and wrote it from beginning to end himself on that occasion, because by a Rebbe there's no such thing as two-feathering. Everything is precise and exact, perfectly exact. And we know what the Chazal tell us. Ein chaver yeitze mitachas yad davar she'eini mesukah. A Talmud Chacham, a chaver, will never give something which is not mesukah. And mesukah means correct, 100%, perfect. So when the Rebbe's Magia Sichah or a Maimon, it makes no difference whether the editing is very thorough or the editing seems to be very, very limited. It's the Rebbe's Teira and the Rebbe's Hagah, and when he gives it out in a mugeh form, that's exactly what he wanted to write. In other words, even though it was written by somebody else, and it's a transcript based on that chassid's best understanding of the Rebbe's words, and the Rebbe edits it, whether he spends 5 hours editing it or he spends 5 minutes editing it, the fact that the Rebbe looks it over and edits it becomes exactly what the Rebbe wished. Because by the Rebbe there's no such thing as something which is not mesukah. And therefore, an edited sichah from the Rebbe is exactly the words as the Rebbe wished for them to be, even though it was written by someone else and he simply edits it. While a sichah which is unedited, or a maimah which is unedited, as precise as it is, based on the Chassidim's desire to know what the Rebbe really wants, like it says in the Hakdamah of Teira Shalom, but it's only what the Rebbe said, and we have no idea what more there is.